Broadway versus Off-Broadway. While most people would believe that the difference between Broadway and Off-Broadway theater is quality, and this is sometimes the case, the true difference between Broadway and Off-Broadway theater is the amount of union involvement in them. Broadway theaters are dominated by unions. This is one of the reasons Broadway theater requires a much higher budget than Off-Broadway theater. But as is often the case in life, increased money does not guarantee increased quality. In a Broadway theater, nearly everyone who works in the theater is a member of a union. In some Broadway theaters, even the ushers are members of a union. Certainly, every stagehand and every actor, all the creative staff, including the directors, the designers, and if it's a musical, the composer, lyricist, and choreographer are members of their respective unions. In an off-Broadway theater, the level of union involvement ranges from almost none to almost full union involvement. Therefore, why isn't a fully involved off-Broadway show considered a Broadway show? There is also a size difference. Broadway theaters are 501 seats and above. Off-Broadway theaters are 99 seats to 500 seats. I'm a proud member of the Actors Equity Association, commonly referred to as Equity or Actors Equity. This union truly started out to protect actors from disreputable theater producers. In the days before the union, actors were paid very, very poorly, and treated even worse. For instance, shows would tour the United States using trains as a way to get from one city to the next. It was very common for actors to find themselves in the following situation. For instance, they might be in Lawrence, Kansas, and the producers would tell the actors that they had no money to pay them, but not to worry. The advance sales in Kansas City are really good, and when they make it there, they will get paid. But the show would get to Kansas City, and the producers would say something about there not being enough advance sales, so here's just enough money to tide you over until we get to Lincoln, Nebraska, where we are certain the sales are fantastic. But then the show would get to Lincoln, and the producers would check the actors into a hotel, and in the dead of night, the producers would sneak away. This would leave the actors with no money to pay the hotel bill, no money to make their way back to New York, and no legal recourse to recover these lost wages. Actors Equity Association stopped this kind of awful producer behavior. They also ensured that actors on Broadway are making a living wage. Unfortunately, in New York, union actors only make enough to live by performing in a show if they are working on Broadway. Union actors working off-Broadway are paid very little compared to the cost of living in New York City. At any given time, less than 5% of all union actors are making enough from acting in order to live. Another misconception about the difference between Broadway and off-Broadway shows is that all off-Broadway shows aspire to be Broadway shows. Now, this may be true of some, but many off-Broadway shows are very happy to remain off-Broadway shows. They know they don't have the appeal to play to a 500-seat or above theater. The longest-running play in the history of American theater is The Fantastics. It started out as an off-Broadway play and remained that way for its 42-year run. Other shows, for instance Rent, A Chorus Line, and Hair, started out off-Broadway and successfully moved to Broadway. The current trend on Broadway is large family-oriented musicals. This trend started, or at least was strengthened, by the Disneyification of Broadway. Producers realized, after the success of such shows as The Lion King and Beauty and the Beast, that if they can create a show where parents must buy tickets for their children as well as themselves, a show can make a lot more money. Another current trend on Broadway is making a musical out of a former successful Hollywood film. Broadway musicals such as Legally Blonde and Spider-Man are examples of this. From a producer's point of view, this is a winning combination. Prospective audience members are already familiar with the titles, which makes selling them tickets easier. While I am glad that many Broadway theaters are thriving with these current business models, I feel that it is stifling to creativity. Once upon a time, Broadway was an incubator for new ideas. Sadly, many great shows will never get a chance on Broadway because producers are not willing to take a chance on them. Producers want to play it safe. However, when bean counters control art, the only art we will have is the kind bean counters appreciate.